coming to get you, Barbara.
Here's some money. Go see a Star War.
But I'm trying, Ringo. I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd.
Welcome back, listeners, to Long Walk Talks. My name is David Hensley. I'm the owner and creative director of Long Walk Productions, and I am joined, as always, by my two co-hosts, Stan Wilson Lee.
All right.
And Chris Wilson Barnes.
Dave, when did decades start?
We'll get to that in a second. So, continuing the tradition of discussing a beloved horror film every October, today we are going to be discussing the 1996 Wes Craven classic, Scream.
And yes, it is a classic, just to be clear.
But before we begin this discussion, I need our listeners to weigh in on something for me. I need you to help me settle a debate here.
There's no debate.
There is a debate between me and Stan.
No.
And the debate is, when do decades begin?
Or
do they begin, with a 00 or a 10?
No, it'd be 01. Or I guess, if you do it in 2010. Yeah.
So, did the 20s begin with 2020, just like the 10s began with 2010, or do they begin with 1, like 2021 or 2011? Stan is of the camp that a decade, for example, would be from 2001 to 2010. I, however, am of the opinion that a decade would have been 2000 to 2009, and that 2010 would have begun a new decade that lasted until 2019.
Both camps are correct.
So please, help us settle this debate. Email me, david.longwalk.
And remember, it depends on if you're looking at a year 0 or a year 1. So.
That's not the email. Dave, what was the email?
The email is david.longwalk@gmail.com. Let me know your thoughts about when do decades begin.
This is totally unnecessary.
Well, for the purpose of the episode, let's take it back 2 full decades, plus some, to the year 1996 so that we can discuss the film Scream. Yep, it's been 24 years since this film came out. Now, I just want to let our listeners know that the last 2 films that we discussed, The Shining in 2018 and Prince of Darkness in 2019, we had guest stars, and those were pretty heavy discussions that we had about those films. This has been a tough year, and we've been doing a lot of heavy film breakdowns when we've been discussing the works of Tarantino. By comparison, this is going to be kind of a softball episode, because there's no denying that Scream is one of the best horror films ever made, and I actually have Katie to thank for reminding me of this, because on the first ever episode of Long Walk Teeny Talks, we did our top 5 horror films and tried to guess each other's list, and she was shocked to discover that Scream wasn't on mine, and I was also shocked to discover that. So I retroactively added it to the list.
You were there when the list was made.
I was the one making the list, yeah. Somehow, when I made that list, Scream just did not end up on it, so I had to correct that.
I can understand why, because I think it is naturally overlooked in listings, especially top 5s, because we have so many that can go in there. Mm-hmm. And Scream's is going to be overlooked. It's taken for granted. It's taken for granted, and it's fairly recent if you think about it. I mean, yeah, it's 25 years old almost, but the idea that when we enter the new decade, it'll be 25 years old.
I think it gets taken for granted because am I too low? I think it gets taken for granted because it ushered in the self-aware horror.
Yes, the meta horror.
Yeah.
I also want to give a real quick shout out to the hosts of This Is a Takeover, Shelby Ray Patterson and Gina Belmont, for giving us this idea. Stan and I are also drinking some beers tonight. I'm drinking a number 19 Belgian Witbier. And Stan, what are you drinking?
I assume it's what is that? Baldhornen? I don't know. I don't know exactly. No, it's Anderson Valley.
Ballhornen. B-A-H-L. Hornen.
Ballhornen.
Yeah. I don't know what the hell
Anderson
that means.
Valley Framboise Rosé Gersh.
Framboise Rose.
Framboise Rose. Is it Gross? Ghost? I should know this since I am German, but it's beer brewed with natural flavors. So it's like a rosé wine flavored beer. I'm thinking, but and where did we got it? What is the bottle?
We got it from Main Street Bottle Shop.
Main Street Bottle Shop, and
here in Rock Hill.
And they have sit down areas and stuff. So it's like it's a really nice little place. It appeared to be, and they got a bar in there. And
yeah, we talked about it for a couple episodes. Well, when we were doing the remote episodes of This Is a Takeover earlier this year, Shelby and Gina liked to shout out what they were drinking, either while we were recording or while they were watching the takeovers. And so when we started bringing it back here and doing them in studio and Main Street Bottle Shop reopened, I was like, why don't we go and get a couple of beers to drink while we do this? So I like this idea.
This is the first time I went in and first time I got something from there. I didn't even know, I don't even think I knew they really existed. I think you pointed it out earlier.
Well, yeah,
this
because
summer,
one night we wanted to go get a beer afterwards, and we were going to go over there, and I realized that they close at like 8 o'clock or 8:30.
And so I'm, thank you because I would have never known, and this is a really new thing for me. So shout out to Rock Hill too for a lot for having this place. So so yeah, thanks Shelby and
Gina. All right, so over 2 decades ago,
2.5 almost,
Wes Craven directed and released a little horror film called Scream that a lot of people say reinvented the horror genre, and we'll discuss that at length here in a little bit. But to start off with, I want to ask Stan, when did you first see Scream? You told me earlier you saw it in the theater, right?
It was actually it's the movie that brought me back to the theater for horror movies, because I was watching all my horror stuff either on early HBO, cable, or the classic VHS videotape. I saw my Halloweens, on my Friday the 13th. I saw for the first time on VHS, and then the sequels to Nightmare. I saw all of them on
VHS.
VHS.
That really takes us back a couple of decades.
Yeah, it was. I'm a few decades old actually. I'm 5.5 decades. I'm 5.5 decades old almost.
Chris, you're almost 4 decades old now.
Your time is coming too, Dave.
But
I'm almost 3.5. It's fine.
So I would have seen it in '96. I would have seen it shortly after it came out, because and I was talking to Amanda about this, because I told her we were doing this, and she was excited that we were talking about Scream, because we're both huge fans of Scream, and the idea that I went in, and because I was already a fan of Dawson's Creek, and Kevin Williamson,
of course,
is a writer on Scream, and so it's like, and basically Scream is Dawson's Creek horror film.
Yeah, Dawson's Creek with murder.
Exactly, and because the teen angst is there, but the thing is with Kevin Williamson, one of the reasons why I dig Scream so much is that it allowed the teens, the victims, to be really smart. Mm-hmm. They're smart. They're sophisticated. They have really interesting discussions.
You care about them.
You care about them. So it's not like the classic.
It's such a departure from other slasher films in which the teenagers only exist to get murdered.
Get murdered, and you're waiting for the kill. That is a problem
as it became more of just a regular genre, where you look at early slasher movies. And they were more. They did have more characteristics to them.
Yeah, and this also sort of becomes a problem, less so with this franchise than others, but you do sort of see that start to happen with the Scream sequels. But you can look at the first film of every major horror franchise, like Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Friday the 13th. If you look at their cast of characters, most of these franchises really do try to get you invested in their characters before they start murdering them. It's in the sequels when they start trying to up the ante that...
Well, because the focus became, the people come to see the killer, so they just want to get to the killing, so they flanderized all the teens to just be the worst aspects of the
stereotypes,
so that you want to see the killings.
Yeah, you've got the whore, the jock, the nerd.
Yeah. The
And the-
quote unquote funny guy.
Exactly.
yeah, the
And-
best friend.
And the thing about Scream is that the killer is basically a regular person.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the supernatural, unkillable, because they get hurt.
Yeah.
The killers get hurt. And even in the sequels, it's like they're beatable.
Mm-hmm.
And they're real creatures that can be beat if you actually fight them. So it's like,
And there's
so
no
the kids
question.
have a chance.
Yeah, there's no question at the end of every Scream film that the killer or killers are dead.
Exactly.
Chris, when did you first see Scream?
Well, thank you for asking. Tonight I'm drinking a Murphy USA purified water. I'm sorry, what was the question?
We're drinking beer.
Yeah, Chris is not much of a drinker, in case those listening don't know.
I didn't feel excluded. It's fine.
I'm sorry.
We could have got you a water flavored beer.
We can hit pause on this and go over there
Yeah,
before the.
No thanks. I don't drink. Insert least favorite beer here.
Uh-huh. So yeah, the question was, when did you first see Scream?
I don't remember. I know I've seen it. It must have been at a party or something, but I didn't see it in theaters. I just remember it was some. It had. I can't remember when I sat down and I know I watched it, but I don't remember when.
Nice. Okay.
It was just among a group at some point.
Yeah.
And I've seen over down the years. I've rewatched bits and pieces of it.
Well, I saw this for the first time. I want to say it was in late 1997 or early 98, also on VHS, because it was around the time that Scream 2 was coming out in theaters. And that was when I was first starting to get into horror. And it's a very easy gateway horror film because it's all the best elements of the genre without the over-the-topness of a lot of these things. And I would have been like 11, 12 years old when I saw this. Still far too young to have been watching it, but still. But I actually did, a couple of years ago in 2017, get to see this on the big screen when Airsley showed this in a double feature with Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
Which that was a blast getting to watch both of them back
Both
to
of them
back.
together is phenomenal. Because it turns out Wes Craven's Wes Craven for me is like John Carpenter for you, or the Nightmare series is my Halloween series. That's what I got into. And again, I was talking earlier about how the kids are smart. So Wes Craven's has written his characters smart the whole time, and his killers are always in response to the, so you're always connected to the kids, the victims, or the protagonists. So it's like, like you said, it is Scream being containing all the elements. It includes Wes Craven, So it's like, and that's the major thing about it.
Well, what I think is fascinating about it is, by the time this came out, the slasher genre was on its last legs. Yep. It really got beaten to the ground in the late 80s. They tried to limp it along throughout most of the early and mid 90s.
Taking people to space.
Yeah. Well, Jason X came much later.
Did it come after?
It
It was
did.
2001, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
But Scream was intended by Wes Craven to be the death knell for the slasher genre, and obviously that didn't work because we got a whole bunch of urban legends and I Know What You Did Last Summers out of it.
And Halloween H2O.
And and Halloween H2O.
You're not fans of H2O.
No, I'm
H2
really
no.
not. Yeah, thank you, Chris. H2 no.
It brought me back to the Halloween series and the current versions of it.
But I can see what he was going for, because as much fun and as enjoyable as Scream is, it is so much more down to earth than basically anything since the first Halloween.
Yeah.
I think, had it not been so massively popular, I could see this killing the slasher genre, because where do you go from here? Just the opening scene of Scream. I'm trying to think of how I want to word this. If you're a horror fan, it's not going to be overtly terrifying for you,
Right.
but
But
it
it's
is
fucked up.
It's fucked up. It's scarier
Yeah.
in a different way than just poor Casey Becker getting stalked and killed by Ghostface. Mm-hmm. It really plays up the being home alone, having to watch a loved one die,
Yep.
parents coming home and being completely helpless to save their
yeah.
child.
You can't
Yep.
scream for help.
Yeah, from the opening scene, to me, it feels like Scream was trying to be the be-all, end-all slasher film.
And there's so many scenes that happen in broad daylight too. You
Yeah.
know, even some of the killings happen in broad daylight. So the idea that, or at least attacks on Sydney and chases of Sydney happen, you know, at the school with everybody in school or in the street in the broad daylight. You know, so the idea that he's going to destroy all the tropes.
Yeah.
About the slasher killer.
Well, part of what makes this opening scene so much more scarier in its context than necessarily its execution is in all of these other slasher films, you introduce these characters and then the killer, whether it's Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger, they show up, they kill the victim, they're dead. And maybe we meet their parents or their older guardians or whoever, but I can't recall anything before Scream where the victim is like gasping for their mother and their parents are like trying to search for them and are horrified. It's
That and the lead up to the actual killing is like you said, you mentioned like Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees. They're silent killers. They're just forces. This killer calls and just starts toying from start to finish with the victim.
Yeah.
So our first that accidentally became a discussion topic, but our first actual one that I had written down for this is who. And this might take some digging back for you to when you first saw this, but who did you think the killers were? And I bring this up because my mom came to visit Katie and I back in September, and we'd already begun our yearly watching of horror films, and we were looking for something that was safe to watch with my mother. And this isn't exactly, this is not a PG musical, but it's still relatively safe to watch with a parent. And my mother was convinced the entire movie that the killer, singular, was either going to be Dewey or Sydney's dad. And I've seen this film so many times in the last 23, 24 years that I just take for granted, oh yeah, everyone knows it's Billy and Stu. So, Stan, do you remember watching the film who you thought, oh, this is the killer?
I probably, when I first saw, I probably ended up, because I kind of knew tropes at the end, because I was old, I was already 29 when this came out, so I'd already had a history of, Nightmare had already been out, I'd seen the Halloweens, so the idea of that I had, and I know Hitchcock and stuff like that. So the idea of red herrings and MacGuffins and stuff, So I don't think I ever thought it was the dad. I always, so that's just going to be, because it's too obvious. So it's going to be, if anything, I probably would have thought that it was going to be Dewey. That he's going to have a psychotic break at the end, and I think this is why it's such great for me is that I don't think I had, and I probably thought it was Jamie Kennedy, Randy's character, because he knew so much about the sequence of events, that it takes, and I'm sure that it got to a place that it has to be somebody that knows about horror movies, so it has to be somebody close to these folks, but I can't say I was right on with the idea that it was Billy and Stu, because that's just a such great ending, that climactic moment, which I find out is the last, 42 minutes of the film takes place at the party, and it's like, but the idea that it turns out to be them, it's like, I don't think I had that.
I was reading about that on the TV Tropes page. The entire third act was just collectively known as Scene 118.
Yep.
and it took 21 days
21
to
days.
shoot. It was such an intense shooting schedule that the crew members afterwards got shirts that said, "I survived scene 118." Chris, do you remember when you watched this the first time who you thought the killer was?
Oh no, I don't remember. But in general, I was thinking about it. I don't really do that in a good movie. I start thinking about who it might be in bad-ish type movies because like I'm bored, so I'm trying to figure out who's it gonna be. I start thinking ahead, and like when I'm watching a movie like Scream and I'm genuinely interested in it, I just want them to surprise me.
Yeah.
I want to see where they're going with it.
And surprise you, they did. I hope. They did me. If you were to tell me, anybody, that you watched this the first time and you went, yeah, it's Billy and Stu. There's two killers. There were the entire movie. I'd say, fuck you, you're a liar.
Yeah, I'll grant that someone might have guessed one or the other.
Yeah.
But not, because one of the better parts of that twist is that there's two.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
Maybe
said,
3.
yeah, there. Retroactively, as of Scream 3, the reveal in Scream 3, there were 3 killers present in the house that night. But that was a shoehorn into the plot later. But I distinctly remember watching this and being very young and new to the horror genre and thinking, oh, it's got to be your dad. It makes the most sense. Like, he's out of town, quote unquote. And nobody can get a hold of him. He never checked into his hotel. It's got to be her dad. And my young mind was blown to discover that it was Billy, first of all, because he's the first major reveal. Because the film does such a good job with its red herrings of making you think, of course it's Billy. And then, well, no, it couldn't be Billy. And then, oh, Billy's dead. So obviously it couldn't have been him. All the way back to, oh, it's Billy. All right. Which just makes the second reveal that Stu was also in on it even better. Because I don't think there's ever any point while watching the film where I was like, yeah, it's Stu. Obviously it's Stu. It's just something about Matthew Lillard's performance and the way the character is written that just does not give him he's a serial killer vibe.
And the fact that that all the friends, they're all friends and they know each other and they know Sydney's past, and what happened to her mom and stuff, and and then you find out that they're responsible for her mom, and it's like, wow, the fact that they've known each other for so long that you go in and you're through that whole film, the first 2/3, just like, that it at least can't be Stu because he's been with them forever, and it's like, and then when it turns out to be Stu, then it's like, oh, that explains a lot because the whole idea of them admitting to their psychopathology and that they're psychopaths, and that they're just doing it for fun.
Well, Stu is just doing it for fun.
Stu is just doing it for
Billy
fun.
has a motive.
Yes.
Despite the fact that he outright says he doesn't have a motive, he then goes on a few minutes later to explain his motive. This film, I think, is equal parts horror movie and like old school, like detective fiction, which you guys both know is my jam.
Yeah.
Because it is chock full of red herrings. And one that I didn't even catch until I was reading the TV tropes page. There's a scene where Dewey is talking to the chief of police outside of, I think, at the police station. And there's a cutaway to the chief's boots. Which despite all the times I've seen this movie, I never connected. He's wearing the same kind of boots that either Billy or Stu is wearing when you see a close-up of him in the bathroom when they attack Sydney. Never put that together. And, I mean, Dewey, it would have been disappointing, but at the ending it turned out, oh, it's Dewey. It would have made sense. But... it would, like I said, it would have been really disappointing had it turned out to be David Arquette.
And David Arquette and Courtney Cox probably wouldn't have got married.
And subsequently divorced. But yeah, that's true.
If she had to shoot him in the head,
Yeah.
Can we just give Courtney Cox props for that? I mean...
No. Yes, we can.
Good for her. I mean, she she didn't have to do it. She had friends,
Yeah.
but she definitely didn't want friends to define her.
And that's why she lobbied for the role,
Yeah.
because it was so different than Monica Geller.
and she's lasted. She's going to be in 5. It's like the fact that she's had as much fun as with it as the viewers have and the rest of the cast has, and it's like good for her and good for Henry Winkler.
Yes, the uncredited Henry Winkler.
So again, just the amount of fun these performers did, and I have to think Wes Craven, this was probably the funnest thing he's ever done for himself, because just the amount of joy, even though it's a horror film, that there's blood and guts and splatters and blah 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 and fright, it's pretty joyful if you think about it.
It is, and I think that has a lot to do with the chemistry between every single actor and how natural their interactions are, and how every single one of them you can look at and you go, I know that guy. I knew that guy in high school.
Yeah.
I knew that girl. Like I knew the Sydney. I knew the Tatum.
Yep.
Rose McGowan's character. I knew those girls.
And I knew Casey, and so.
And I think before the franchises became all about the monsters, I think that's where the characters kind of were.
Yeah.
It's like you're supposed to find them relatable because it's supposed to be more shocking when they die.
Yeah. And you're supposed to feel something when they die.
Yes.
Which I'm just going to keep randomly spouting out trivia that I learned thanks to IMDb and TV Tropes. Stan, did you read that? I guess the movie got a lot of flack for Tatum's death being the most quote-unquote ridiculous. Everyone else in the movie gets stabbed or gets their throat slit or something. Tatum gets her neck broken in the...
I think that's one of the best kills.
Yeah, I do too. But it turns out that Rose McGowan was actually skinny enough to get through that doggy door.
Oh, yeah, that death. Yeah.
Yeah. They actually had to find a way to trap her in that to keep her from like falling out as it was coming up.
I always... And I might be retconning this, but I always took that as a homage to classic horror, to the classic slashers. Like the Jason Voorhees picking up a person in a sleeping bag and smashing him against a tree. You
mean the best kill in horror movie history?
The best kill in horror movie history. That idea that he's paying tribute to those kind of kills in horror films, where it's not the most realistic kill in the movie, and it's the only moment that takes away from the complete groundedness of the film, because everything else is based in physics. That this can happen. He could stab you that way, and if you hit him in the head with the door of the freezer, he still can get up because you didn't hit him hard enough to knock him out. So the idea, and he's still sliding around the garage, trying to catch her, and then, she's trying to crawl through the doggy door, and I got the switch right here.
Yeah,
and
you just put that on a silver platter for him, Tatum.
Yeah,
he literally just reaches over and presses the garage door opener.
And the fact that she is so small, that's why it's able to keep.
Yeah.
If she was any heavier, it would probably failed. But her lightness allows her to get the. Again, I think it's the best kill because it's the classic best kill in movie idea.
Yeah. No, listeners, if you don't know the scene where we were referring to with Jason Voorhees in the sleeping bag, I implore you. Please go to YouTube and just search for Jason Voorhees sleeping bag. It is hilarious in its execution.
It's Kane's,
no pun intended.
It's Kane's first Jason, or is it the first time he did Jason?
Now that part I don't know. I don't remember.
Because that's his favorite kill too.
I know when they recreate that for Jason X, it was Kane Hodder. I'm not sure who the original sleeping bag kill.
Oh really? I thought it was.
Or I don't.
Maybe not.
I don't know enough about the Friday the 13th franchise to tell you for sure.
It's a favorite enough kill that they recreated it in Jason X.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Definitely check that out. Even if you just scan it to that moment, it's really well done. It's choreographed well, and it is a great kill.
So I mentioned it briefly earlier, but a lot of people consider Scream to have redefined the horror genre as a whole, but also the slasher subgenre. So what do you guys think? Is that an apt observation? Do you really think that Scream reinvented the horror genre or the slasher genre? Stan, what do you think?
Like you said, I think Craven may have been trying to destroy some of the, at least the current conventional wisdom about what slasher movies are supposed to be. And so,
well, current as of like 3 decades ago.
Exactly. In the sense that he ended up reinventing the idea of what a slasher movie could be. Yes. Because I don't think we get like a Hatchet if we don't have a Scream, because it reminded us, Scream reminds us why we dug that shit in the first place. And like I said, this goes back to the garage door kill. That reminds us why we watch these things in the first place. You know, it's like, oh, wow, that was cool. Oh, can she get out? Nope, she's dead. You know, so the idea that he knew that he was going to do enough, even though he was trying to destroy some stuff, I think he knew that he was going to allow future filmmakers that want to continue in this genre, we can do different stuff, you know, and that we can still pay homage to what we love, but we can do it with so much more joy, you know, and I think he brought joy back, you know,
to a joyless genre.
To a joyless genre where it wasn't just people, you know, oh, I'm doing a horror movie for a paycheck, you know, I got to do this, and maybe this will start me on another career, and if I'm a director, maybe it'll allow me to do what I want to do. But no, I think Scream re-legitimized horror as a valid genre of film, and I think everything since then has been a attempt at growing the genre. You know, we get Rob Zombie coming in with his Halloween contributions. Like it or not, he does new things with it. We get Adam Green and his Hatchet stuff, and
Victor Crowley.
Victor Crowley,
not Aleister Crowley.
Not Aleister Crowley. That's the other guy. But Victor Crowley, and again that turns into one of the great icons, and that's within the last 15 years. You know, it's like, but Victor Crowley is an icon of horror for me, you know, and it's a total homage to classic slasher. But everybody in that movie you care for, you know, you have a connection to, especially Danielle Harris.
You're getting off track.
But the idea that yes, we were allowed to, if we were horror fans but couldn't admit it, we were allowed to come out of the closet in a sense, because like you were saying earlier, that at that point, slasher movies, horror films as a whole were kind of being seen as not very high on the echelon of movies, you know. So it's like they were like the first rung you step on on your way up the ladder. But now I think it's a legitimate genre, in that, you know, it's like, oh, I'm doing my horror movie. Yes, finally, you know, because everybody wants to do a horror movie now.
I'd go so far as to say that without Scream, we wouldn't have Jordan Peele and Get Out.
Absolutely.
Chris, what do you think? Is reinventing the horror genre a fair assessment?
I think so. It's a lot. Scream. I would liken it to what happened with Final Fantasy, because if you don't know, the reason it's called Final Fantasy is the first one was going to be the last game Square ever made, because their company was not doing great, so they were just like, we're going to make one more game. So they called it Final Fantasy. And here we are, how many years later, and they're still going strong.
3 decades later, I think, right?
Right about 13. The same.
About 3 decades?
More, at least 4. somewhere between 3 and 4, because they're up to 15 of them now, and not including spin-offs.
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing, for good or for ill. Like Final Fantasy, Scream just basically made a big upheaval in the genre, to the point where people, even if it's not a smart movie, they try to be smart, because that's the standard now. You can't just go in a straight line anymore.
Absolutely.
You have to make twists and turns.
Often imitated, never duplicated.
Right.
In my opinion, no. I don't think that it reinvented the slasher genre. I think it codified it.
Good point. Yes.
Wes Craven took all the best parts. He cut out all the fat. And what we ended up with was the slasher film. This and Halloween, I would say, are the definitive slasher films. And it's just been in this discussion we're having tonight that I realize there's no nudity in any of the 4 Scream films. And that is a pretty heavy staple of the horror genre. Yeah, there's gonna be some boobs in a slasher movie. Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Friday the 13th, even moving farther along, Hatchet.
Mm-hmm.
All of these films, pretty much every entry in every franchise has some level of nudity, but not the Scream franchise.
And in the franchise of Scream, that's one of the things they talk about, in their horror movie discussions, because part of the whole conceit of it is that they're all experts on horror movies or have a really close connection to
They
them.
all have a passing knowledge. Randy is the expert.
And he has rules, and he has a whole set of rules that, if you show your boobs, you're dead, or you have sex, you're dead. The idea that, and so Wes Craven totally circumventing that. It's like, I don't have to show boobs because I talked about what happens when you show boobs. So it's like,
well, they hit everything else. Like, they check off all of those other boxes. Yep. Like, you can never drink or take drugs, right, Stan?
Beer.
That was a sad little clink, but
we're dead.
Yeah, we're gonna pause right here. I'll be right back. So that is my opinion on that. I would not say that it redefined the horror genre. I'd say it codified it. So, does it hold up 24 years later? I think we all are pretty much in agreement on this. But Stan, what do you think? Does it hold up?
I just saw it again because it had been a long time since I'd seen it, and I had to watch it, to make sure I wasn't talking out of my ass for tonight. And so I was like, I'll get it and I'll watch it over 2 nights or whatever. And so I get it. It was the most fun at the theater still 24 years later. It held up so well. There's only one thing that even dates it or tries to date, and the idea that say cellular phones. And they don't say cells; they say cellular phones, and the cellular phones they have are those Nokia style, with has the earpiece and has the
They were bricks.
They were bricks,
yeah,
and the little antenna on the top, and everything, and that really is the only thing that dates it, and then maybe in the TV van where they're on a 30-second delay, because I think it's 2 seconds now is the longest. But that's the only thing that it's even close to dating, and none of that matters, for the telling of the story. And yeah, I got my frights, even though they're hands down, they're all jump scares. For the most part.
For the most part.
And
I still go back to that opening scene, though.
The opening scene, because so much of it is on the phone, and it totally drives up the terror, and he keeps calling her back, and he gets madder and madder and madder, and so it's like, and it turns out the guy that does the voice is like the funniest man in the world. He's also the voice of what's his face in the villain in the Powerpuff Girls.
That's
you know?
right.
So it's like
Chris, what's that character's name?
What is it, Stan?
oh my God,
It's Mojo Jojo.
Mojo Jojo.
I was fully relying on the two of you. I've never watched Powderpuff Girls.
It's great.
Powerpuff.
Powerpuff.
It's not Powderpuff?
It's Powerpuff because they're powerful. They're powerful.
Well, the last 20-something years of my life have been a lie. I thought it was the Powderpuff Girls. Look at that. I learned something tonight.
But for me, I had so much fun. I was laughing. I threw my chips up in the air because I was screaming right at the times they needed me to scream. And the fact that it's so self-reverential, you know, there's like, wait a moment, this is the time when they wake back up and they're not fully dead yet. And so he wakes up and she shoots him in the head. He's like, you're dead now, motherfucker, or whatever. But just
not in my movie.
Not in my movie. But yeah, I had so much. It was such a blast. And I came into work the next morning just like, you know, dude,
gushing like you'd seen it for the first time.
Yeah, it totally was. And I had as much fun as I did when I saw it the first time in the theater. And that in itself means it holds up because, you know, you know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, but there was still stuff that, you know, everything worked. Everything still worked and did its job. And so, it holds up completely.
Nice. Chris, what do you think? 24 years later, does Scream hold up?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, pretty much what Stan said I can agree with, especially because there's very little. It looks like Wes Craven did a really good job of making sure that there's not a lot that will date it aside from cellular phones. But that's right up there with, I mean, I love Christmas Vacation. The only thing that really dates it, if you're looking for it, is the shopping montage where they're using the old credit card sliders.
Yes.
It's like, that's really the only thing. It's like that kind of takes you out for a second. And it's like, and a story as good as Scream, I mean, you're going to overlook that too. You're just going to look at that and go, look at those, or, you know. Or if you're younger than us, and you're like, "What are those?"
Yeah.
And the writing and the kid, like I said, it just goes back to how smart Kevin Williamson allowed his characters to be. You know, they knew the time they were in. They knew who each other were. They knew what they were doing. And so it was just you were back with pals. You know, and so it was awesome.
Yeah. I think obviously I agree. Aside from the repeated references to cellular telephones and how rare they are to have. But I think it's also fascinating that this is very much a pre-Columbine movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think nowadays a kid running through school dressed in the same costume as a murderer would be an automatic suspension. Expulsion. And
especially because of zero tolerance policies.
Yep. It was... God, this is an old thing to say, but high school was a different world.
Yeah.
In the time that these characters inhabited it.
It's kind of like how you can tell which movies are pre 9/11 because of how people act on airplanes in the movies.
Yeah. Yes. I can show up to the airport 5 minutes before my flight leaves. Yeah. Well, that's all the discussion topics that I really had for this movie. And like I said, it's kind of a softball episode, but it's a very straightforward film. There's a lot to love. And if you've never seen Scream, why did you listen to this whole episode? We just spoiled the entire thing for you. You should still go back and watch it anyway. But
because the surprises live up, that they hold up. It's just so much. It's so much fun.
I mean, we spoiled it, but we spoiled it poorly. Go watch it.
Yeah, basically.
Now, really, the only question left is, what's your favorite scary movie?
Which was the original title of the film. More trivia for you.
Yes, which the
Wayans brothers.
spawned my favorite thing to come out of this, which was Scary Movie.
I have seen the first 2 Scary movies.
You can stop.
Yeah,
that's the. I saw 3, and 3 it was such a disappointment, and then it went downhill from there.
Well, and unfortunately, it also spawned the blank movie parody genre.
Friedberg and Seltzer, they need to be blackballed.
Yeah. Well, haven't they been?
Essentially, they made so many of these and just sucked the well dry so hard that I'm not sure. Like they kind of, it's funny, and stemming from the revival of slasher movies spawned the 2 people who killed parody movies.
Yeah. Well, we haven't mentioned the fact that earlier this year, back when Civilization was relatively normal at Mad Monster Party, we actually got to see a lot of this cast. And
Yeah, well, that was one of the big draws of Mad Monster Party that past year.
this year.
That happened this year? Shit.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was 9 months ago, Chris.
Valentine's
instead of like
weekend.
2 years ago? Because it feels like
it. Yeah. But Nev
the
Campbell,
before time.
Matthew Lillard, Jamie Kennedy, and Roger Stone, Roger Jackson, were all at this year's Mad Monster Party.
And I got an RIP just to hang out with them, and I got there and I was all super starstruck, you know. And
Stan died.
Nev was beautiful, you know. It's like
They were on.
I shouldn't say this, but Matt Lillard was hilarious as always, and I was talking earlier about the joy that they had as a cast. It carried over to
like talking about the chemistry of the characters. It definitely was the people making that movie, because that panel was also incredible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's one of the best celebrity panels I have been to at a convention. It was such a joy to listen to all of them. Just talk to each other, talk to the audience, answer the questions. It was so much fun. Do you guys recommend any of the sequels to this at all? How do you feel about the Scream sequels?
I know I've watched one of them with you. You showed me. We watched one at your house one night. It was the one Timothy Oliphant was in.
Oh, that's 2.
That is 2. Okay,
Yeah.
so we watched 2.
I haven't seen 4.
You don't need to see 4.
I don't think I have. But
The only good thing about 4 is Hayden Panettiere.
then I have seen 4 because I remember her. I thought she was in 3, but
She would have been way too young for 3.
yeah,
I don't think she was born when Scream 3 came
that
out.
because Scream 3 was still early too. It was early 90s, wasn't it?
It was 2001.
Early 2001, 2000s.
Yeah,
but,
it kicked off the new decade.
Yes, it did. In my camp, but I have to admit, I don't have a problem with them. Just because I think they're having a blast doing it. And in 3, they totally destroy the trope of
The
black folks being the first to die, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, and they throw it. So it's like
Well,
anything that's
especially-
come after that is talked about that happening.
Well, especially after Scream 2 leaned into it by killing off its only 2 black characters first in the
Which
film.
one's Omar Epps? Is that
That's
2?
2.
Okay, so
him and
it happens
Jada
in 2.
Pinkett Smith are the
Okay,
2
that's
people
what-
killed at the beginning of the
3 has nothing to do with that then. Maybe I don't.
No, it's been a minute since I've watched 3, but if I remember correctly, the only black character in the movie fucks off like once the killings start and doesn't come back.
Yes. And
AKA the smartest man in horror history.
Yes.
and Liv Schreiber's in 3, right?
Yes.
So I haven't seen 3. I haven't seen 4. But I don't have a. They're not. I obviously they haven't been super memorable to me, but I think they do a nice continuation, and it also allows the idea of Courtney Cox's character to set up the whole stab.
Yes.
You know, and the books that she wrote and the movies that are, you know, based on her books, you know, that turn out to be the movies based on the movie Scream. You know?
Yeah.
You know, so that whole idea, that whole sequence, and dude, I'm excited about 5.
I don't know how to feel about it. Just because I hated 4 so much. Chris, what were you going to say?
I would have been mad if a movie based on a book about my experiences got a bad as title as Stab.
Right. Well, my completely unasked for rankings of the franchise would go 1, 3, 2, and 4. I was so excited when 4 came out in 2011 because I'm such a big fan of the first 3. It was the first movie that I saw after I moved back here from LA. I was like, yeah, this is a good way to settle back in. I'm going to go watch this new entry in this franchise that I love. And I walked out so fucking mad. It was so bad. Fucking Kieran Culkin and I can't remember who the girl killer was. Again, spoilers. I'm sorry. That was 9 years ago. So I am cautiously... I'm not even cautiously optimistic. I don't know how to feel about 5. I know it starts shooting soon.
And it has the cast. You know, the originals are.
They will be remiss, in my opinion, if they don't kill off Sidney, Gale, Dewey, or all of them. Like, they have been... these characters have been safe for entirely too long. If you want to do something new with the genre, you got to get rid of at least one of them.
And who did you say that the directors were? They're the ones that...
They're the same directors that did Ready or Not.
And
probably
in
the
that
best...
case,
one of the best horror movies to come out of 2019.
Agreed. And in that case, what they did with Ready... Which, again, Ready or Not is very Scream-like in the sense that they have trampled on tropes and rebuilt stuff and have raised bars in the sense of what makes something scary. You know? So I wouldn't put past them that they will kill off the original folks.
Yeah. And I mean,
sorry, I was looking at the cast list for Scream 4. Wow, it was a really strong female cast. I just noticed Wes Craven did a cameo as a coroner in the movie, and it just says coroner scenes deleted.
Oh, God,
he took out his.
There's so much irony there. Who was the
I don't know who the killer is. I'll just start reading names. Lucy Hale. Sherry.
Her name is Jill. The character's name is Jill.
Oh, hold on.
It's Sydney's cousin. I remember that much.
Then I have seen it.
Emma Roberts.
Okay. And I'm right. It's Kieran. It's Kieran.
Rory Culkin.
I knew it was one of the fucking Culkins.
Culkins are always skulking around.
I have seen Scream 4, but again,
well, and it's got
not going to be memorable.
5 has got a 2022 release date currently, which I'm sure that's COVID related because next year is 25 years. It seems like the 25 year anniversary would be the perfect time to release this film. But it probably got pushed back far enough that they wouldn't be able to meet a release schedule. Although it's October now, they have a full year. They start shooting soon.
They should just market it that way. It's just in time for the 26th anniversary.
Yeah. Well, no, I think we could all just collectively pretend that this year didn't happen and just mark everything back a year. It's the 25th anniversary of Scream, and it's been 26 years. No, it hasn't. Fuck you.
Honestly, it doesn't matter.
This is the only way I will accept the new decade beginning with 2021 is if we just ignore this year entirely.
Sure. I mean,
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people jumping into my camp, into my team, just for that purpose.
I mean, you heard me get confused about Mad Monster Party. There is literally a before time now in terms of how time works for me.
I posited this theory earlier this year, and it's only gotten more true. There's January and February.
Yeah.
That was the true 2020. And then there was March, and that was its own 2020. Then there was April and May, which is like 2020C. Then July, August, until now, that's like 2020D, in my opinion. 2020.
2020F for me, man.
You're on a whole different timeline than the rest of us.
Just a fail.
And you can't really fault him because, again, time is meaningless at this point.
Yep. But circling back around to Scream again, I just want to finish off by saying this. Don't watch the MTV series. I tried. I made it, I think, halfway into the first season, and I couldn't do it. Watch the first 3 movies and stop there. Yeah. Maybe watch 5 if it turns out to be good a year and a half from now. So that is our Halloween episode for 2020. Coming up in a few weeks, later this month is Hell in a Cell, right, Chris?
I guess.
For the WWE?
I think. I know I'm sure I mentioned it in previous episodes, but I cannot.
I'm relatively sure. But in terms of our show, in about 2 weeks, we're going to be releasing the next installment of our Quentin Tarantino Quarantino discussion, where we're going to be talking about his film from 2009, Inglourious Bastards. And
It is Hell in a Cell.
yeah, and so later this month, you can expect the Hell in a Cell episode of This Is a Work, hosted by David Two Dogs Hayes and our very own Chris the Fashion Plate Barnes.
Not my name.
That is your name on that
is
show.
not my name.
And you can also look out for some new episodes of Long Walk Teeny Talks, hosted by me and my wife, Katie.
Long Walk Teeny Talks.
Long Walk Teeny Talks. Stan, never mind your social media distancing. You don't want people to find you online, do you?
I mean, you can.
You just have to work for it.
I dare you.
The other Stanley,
I
but
fucking dare you.
yeah.
Chris, if people wanted to reach out to you online, how could they do that?
I mean, I don't see why, but it's Twitter is probably the best place to argue with me because that's what I assume will be happening. It's Chris. So what?
You have Twitter?
I do.
Okay.
I feel like I've mentioned this before.
He has. Literally every episode, I ask him this question.
Well, I just forget.
You're cut off. It's Chris the OK.
All right. Well, if you want to follow me personally, the best place to do that is going to be Instagram, even though I've been really lax about posting pictures for the last couple of months. It's almost
Post
like
more dogs.
Yeah, it's almost like this year has been weird and depressing or something. But you can follow me on Instagram at DB Hensley. If you want to keep up with the podcast, you can like us on Facebook. Just search for Long Walk Podcast. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can search for at Long Walk Podcast. That's singular, as in one podcast, not the three that we have on this network, possibly.
Now, in my defense, that was the character limit for the name.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about
I
that.
wanted to put an S on the end, but Twitter said no.
If you have any thoughts about Halloween or horror movies or the Scream franchise or when a decade begins, you can reach out to me, david.longwalk
I think we solved that.
at gmail.com. So, thank you very much for listening, and we will be back in a few weeks.
Peace out.